Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of InfoWars Nightly News. This is a very important interview we're about to do. In fact, in the 9 months of the Nightly News, this is probably the most important interview we've done to date. Why? Because the woman we're about to talk to is a survivor of a very serious false flag criminal attack. And of course, that is the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building on April 19th, 1995. And of course, the anniversary is tomorrow. That's why we're doing the show here tonight, but I intend to air this interview tomorrow on the radio to the 3 million daily listeners because it is so important. Jane Graham's testimony, she was the head of the HUD department in the Alfred P. Murrah building that day, and she lost a lot of friends, and of course, she was injured. And her testimony ties together with the testimony of police officers and others and is completely damning. She is a star witness in all of this. There were other eyewitnesses, people like Terrence Yakey, who was Police Officer of the Year and saved people inside, that saw some of the things she saw. He was told, if you don't shut up, we're going to kill you. And they did kill him. He was tortured to death. Then there's police officers like Don Browning, who on my show right here have said that the FBI came in and told him, you and your wife are going to be killed if you don't shut up. He was the head of the K-9 unit. He was the sergeant in charge. He was there minutes after. These are eyewitnesses. So people have died and been threatened to bring you this information. So this lady has a lot of courage. It was about a year ago that I interviewed her last, and she said, I think this is going to be one of my last interviews, and I've twisted her arm to come back here, but she's told me this is probably the last interview she'll ever do, and she's joined, of course, via video Skype with the director of the film, James Lane. And, of course, the film is Noble Lie. Great to have you guys here with us this evening. A very important interview, as I just said. James, introduce those who may not know who the little lady is sitting next to you.
Jane Graham here is one of the survivors of the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19th, 1995. She was actually at a training session that morning when the explosive went off, and she was gracious enough to be interviewed in the documentary, and we're really grateful to have her here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where do you guys want to start? I mean, this is an important final interview. How about why were you in the film? Why do you think the film A Noble Lie is important? And then briefly recapping the basics of what you witnessed.
Well, I think I should start 2 weeks prior to the bombing because I had gone down to the snack bar in the building, and I had gone in for coffee and sitting there, and then in one of the booths, and then across from me in another booth were 2 ladies that were sitting there drinking coffee, and one of the ladies was telling her friend that she would talk to someone in the with the FBI office at 50 Penn Place, that they had gotten that their friend told her that they had received a fax saying that there was going to be a bombing of a federal building in Oklahoma City. And she took that and gave that to her boss. And he said, yes, that they were aware and not to worry about it. And I'm listening to this conversation, and I'm saying, God, you know, surely they wouldn't bomb 50 Penn Place. That's a public, you know, it's not a government building. But I was concerned at the time about it. So I went home and I told my husband about it. And I said, you know, I can't believe that, you know, that they're not terribly concerned over this. And they said for her not to worry about it, they'd take care of it. They were aware of it. I didn't think any more about that. And then the Friday before the bombing, when I drove to work, I had a reserved parking space, which was on the first level down where you could get out and go directly into the elevators and then go up to the floors, to the ground floor or onto your offices. And when I arrived there, I saw 3 men who were standing there. They were behind a station wagon. It reminded me of the Ford station wagon, the large one that used to have the wood on it. And I thought, they're parked in a reserved parking space, and as I recall, the car was the station wagon was kind of a light green color, and it was really dirty all over. You couldn't see the plates good, everything, because there was just real dirt all over it. And again, that struck me as odd. But the men were standing there, and one of the gentlemen had a large, looked like plans of the building. And he was pointing in the direction of the northeast and the southeast of the building. And there was another gentleman standing there with him. Both of those men were dressed in jeans, short sleeve shirts. They were about, I would say, probably 5'9", 5'10". They were very muscular, obviously very good athletes. They may have been, someone said to me, what did you think they were? And I said, if I were going to give, I would say military, a surveyor, those were the things that if I were having to describe them, I really thought for a minute that maybe they were there because of, we had had some gas odors previously and then telephone problems, which, they've had people come in and deal with. And so, but I was watching them. And then there was a man there, the other gentleman beside him, who was taking directions from the man who seemed to be in charge, and he was the one with the plans. And he had a paper sack, and he had some wiring, which looked like telephone wiring. And that was another reason that I thought perhaps that they were with the telephone company. And I went, I just kind of watched them as I was standing there and moving slowly forward. And there was another gentleman there, and he had on black pants, black cowboy boots, black hat, I can remember. And he had the band on his cowboy hat had silver metallic round places on it. And as he was watching me, he was very good looking. His hair came down to his collar, and very dark hair, very straight eyebrows. As I said, very nice looking. And the gentleman who had I was watching, he had a bar of what I would call, I wasn't sure what it was. It looked like putty. And the gentleman who looked to be in charge told him, put that back, and he put that, and he put the wiring back into the paper sack. Then he closed that, and then he went over to the door behind the driver's seat and put that inside there, and then came back to stand. And at that point, the gentleman who I had seen there that was standing there, who I later identified as Andreas Strassmeier, he walked over to the north side of the wall and had a cigarette over there, and then he came back. But all three of them then at that time were watching me, and I thought, well, I'll say something later to GSA, and then because I had a meeting that morning and I had a class to go to, so I went on in the building, and I really got busy. I didn't think any more about it at the time, and I went on up to my office and just didn't think about, about that issue on that Friday.
Let me interject a question here, Jane, just to condense and recap this bombshell information that's a lot of it been corroborated by others over time and all these connections. A couple of weeks before, you hear women saying, yeah, the FBI says there's going to be a federal building get bombed. And that's later come out in court documents that they had, quote, had the threats. As the system, those that actually carried out the false flag were beginning to create that false history. Then, before the bombing, you see these individuals, and I guess woman's intuition, you can see guys with a purpose. I mean, these are bombers. I mean, what was it about them that made you stop and pay attention? Was it just woman's intuition? I mean, I'm just trying to guess, why were you paying attention to these people? It's kind of a side issue, but
okay.
Since I brought it up, what was your exact position there at HUD?
I was at that point, I was a multifamily specialist and dealing with apartment complexes, anything having to do with multifamily housing. And I was also at that time head of the homeless program. And I was the regional vice president of AFGE.
Sure, because that information's important background. And again, what floor were you on?
Actually, I was on the 7th floor. That's where my union office was, and that's also where my office space was for my job.
Okay, so give us the dates. It was a few weeks before that you heard the woman talking about the FBI says a federal building's going to be bombed in Oklahoma City. What was the date again that you saw?
That was 2 weeks before the bomb. That was 2 weeks before the bombing.
Yes. So a few weeks before you heard the woman say that.
Yes.
But what was the date of?
The Friday before the bombing, the Friday before the 19th. That's when I drove in and I saw these men. The reason I was curious about them was that the parking spot in which they were in is a reserved parking spot. And I knew the cars that normally parked there, and that was not one of them. And since they were behind that car, I wondered why they were there. And then I was curious because they were talking, they had that sack, they had the plans, they were looking. I even contemplated at one point, maybe thinking about just going over and said, can I help you? And I thought, no, I'm late, I'm running behind, and I need to get upstairs. And then, you get that feeling when they don't want to talk to you, you don't want to figure you better go on and just mind your own business. And
one of the major significant points of this is that she later identified one of those people in the basement as Andreas Strassmeier. Andreas Strassmeier is actually, he's a suspected government informant because he was working with the Texas Light Infantry and militia, and they saw him going into a federal building in Texas using a key code. He later comes to Oklahoma City and starts working out of Elohim City. We know that there were many Southern Poverty Law Center agents working there, many informants. The founder of the city itself was actually an informant. Now, Carol Howe, ATF informant, actually said that Andreas Strassmeier was one of the people that were going into Oklahoma City prior to the bombing, scouting locations, almost to the extent where she told her friends not to go to any federal buildings in April.
And to just briefly expand on that, because there's so much evidence, it's not a lack of evidence, it's too much evidence. It later came out in memos via lawsuits, thanks to Jesse Trentadue and other lawyers, that the Southern Poverty Law Center had informants at the very top of Elohim City, this white supremacist command center. You've got Strassmeier, who's the son of a prominent German who's over here, and we know how our government likes to use Germans for dirty work, and it just goes on and on and on from there.